I'm going to start with Andrea Munteanu, who is the AI/ML product manager at Canonical. You obviously heard her talk earlier today with Maciek from Dell. Andrea has a background in telecommunications and retail, and she's really passionate about helping enterprises make better decisions with data and AI, and she brings a lot of passion for open source. So we'll hear obviously about that. We're also very honored to have Claire Schramm with us. She is the BT Service Cloud Director. And Claire runs BT Group's Cloud Services Division, which is a team of 600 professionals dedicated to revolutionizing the infrastructure that hosts BT Enterprise and IT and network workloads. Welcome, Claire. Prior to joining BT, she worked at Google and IBM. We have Jens Peterson with us as well, and Jens is the head of product management for HPC at Elektrobit. Prior to joining Elektrobit, Jens held various positions at Continental, focusing on software architectures for advanced driver assistance systems and sensing technologies for autonomous driving. In his role, he's been involved in various strategic planning for the future of autonomous mobility and safety systems. Welcome, Jens. And of course, I'm also very honored to have Edel Curley here. And Edel is a market development manager in the Network and Edge Solutions Group at Intel. She is responsible for driving next generation product adoption with communication service providers. And she has extensive technical experience in telecommunications systems. And her current focus is building a strong AI ecosystem for Intel's end customers. So thank you all for joining us here today. I want to start by having a fairly open question for you all, which is, what role is really AI playing in your industry? And I'll start with Jens, because obviously for a lot of us, it's very exciting to hear about technologies like autonomous driving and all those things. But we rarely think about, for example, how automotive companies are actually using AI, for example, to develop products and for R&D purposes. So I'd like to hear from Jens, what are the kind of use cases and what are the roles you're seeing for AI?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. In the automotive industry, we've seen multiple different applications of AI. We see applications, of course, on board on the vehicle. Yeah, that sounds better. On board on the vehicle, but also, of course, in surrounding space. Infrastructure, there is some AI in infrastructure, but then also of late, you start seeing AI coming into, for example, a development tool chain to accelerate processes, reduce the software development life cycle. So we see it all over the place. One of the oldest applications, of course, of AI is actually CNNs. You tend to have those in cameras, in the so-called front cameras that implement ACC and sign recognition and things like that. For the image recognition part, there would have been CNN on board already for a number of years.
Thanks, Jens. And I'm interested also in hear about this, like, connection, for example, between edge use cases like the ones we know or hear about a lot in automotive and telco, because of course a lot of those are enabled by better connectivity. So I'm curious, Edel, if you can also talk a little bit more about AI in telco and what kind of use cases are you seeing?
Sure. So I see AI being leveraged to improve the performance efficiency, to improve the power efficiency in network management. So there are many edge locations in the telecommunications network, and power efficiency is a very important aspect of that. And kind of my favorite AI use case is where an AI model is incorporated in the software that runs on the base station, which is the first piece of equipment that your phone connects to. And that AI model, depending on the traffic conditions, depending on the number of users, the throughput, the time of day, it can make decisions about the number of cores that are needed by the application, and it can put unused cores into a low power what Intel would call C states, but low power states. So just saving power for the telecommunications service providers, which is a very interesting use case, I think.
That's very interesting. Maybe you can also tell us a little bit more about the ecosystem at Intel and how the CSPs fit in there.
Yeah, so the communication service providers are they have gone down a route of wanting to separate the software from the hardware. So but they have the challenge of needing to provide an SLA to their customers. You know, the network needs to be resilient, redundant. You know, there's a term 5 nines. So there's an ecosystem there that's, you know, evolved over the years, over all the networks, over 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. But within these established partners, you know, they're all starting to build in AI into their application from the, you know, as they're developing their product. It's not just something new. It needs to be part of their product offering. And, you know, Intel is working on, you know, working with different frameworks, different AI frameworks, like PyTorch, you know, trying to make sure that the best performance is, that our ecosystem partners get the best performance from our silicon and get the performance optimizations, you know, that will help them.
Thank you so much. So I also want to turn the mic to Claire, because obviously you come from a slightly different angle to this question, right? So you're more in operations, and can you tell us a little bit more about the role AI is playing in your case at BT?
Sure, thanks, Gloria. So BT, traditional telecommunications provider, providing consumer and business services. We've to date gone pretty far along our journey around customer experience, cross-selling and upselling applications. That's a lot of the public work we've done with Amazon is around those kind of customer-focused use cases. And we have had some good impact as a result of that work. But what we need to turn our attention to now is where we have the heavy data planes, and that's in our network and our network management functions, and moving more towards operational use cases around self-healing environments, network optimization. And that's where we're going to start to see a lot of real benefit and really start to make a step change in the industry. I'm really proud to be surrounded by some of my team here today who are working on a lot of our observability tooling around this space. And I'll talk a bit more about that as we go along.
Perfect. And Andrea, in your case, of course, you come from a retail background, and we know a lot about, for example, AI in retail, but I'm just curious if you can give us a run through of those kind of use cases you see in the market.
It was very interesting to hear about the telco and automotive use cases, because I think when it comes to retail, there's a lot about growing selling, upselling, cross-selling. And whether we talk about e-commerce or brick and mortar stores, understanding the customer behavior and trying to better recommend things that they could buy or they could consume is crucial. But then also looking at operations, automating them and forecasting when they might bump into problems is another use case. And inventory management is one known one. What is exciting there that it's very dependent on season, country, culture. And if you do not keep those things in mind, it can easily be challenging, and it cannot be easily replicated, on the other hand, across the whole globe, for example, as well.
So we talked a little bit, we touched upon some of the challenges a little bit, but I'd like to hear more, like, what are the kind of challenges that you face or that your customers are facing now in the industry when it comes to implementing AI and taking projects to production, for instance? And also, where are they running AI at the moment? What's the current state of affairs? Go ahead, Jens.
So thank you. I'll get started. So one of the big challenges, of course, is that both in the auto industry, we have consumer-facing AI that's usually in the vehicle, with the particular challenge that it basically has to, if it's not just a convenience feature, has to have operational guarantees, whether it's connected to a network or not. I know networks are very good these days, mobile networks, but they're far from perfect. So if it's a function in the vehicle that carries, some sort of operational guarantee, then it has to provide it on board. It will be an edge device, and it will have to provide the complete processing on edge. So that's a particular area. As I said before, it's an area that the industry has explored quite a bit, and Elektrobit has been also quite active in this space over the years. The bigger area where we see change right now is, of course, in convenience functions, which are usually currently still backed up by network, via infrastructure, not edge devices. If you lose connectivity in your car, you will have noticed that your assistant, your voice assistant, no longer works. So that's one, but we believe also that there's going to be a change. Elektrobit has invested quite a bit in bringing AI technology to the cockpit, as we call it, these voice assistant type of infrastructures. And we believe that this will become more and more edge supported because of A, connectivity issues, and B, of course, car makers are not usually in the business of operating huge data centers and looking also for business models to run those data centers. So for them, it's been always a question, how do I provide this service? How do I monetize this service? Because car buyers are a very unique breed. Once they bought a car, follow-up costs, aside from oil changes and things like that, are not a popular topic. So subscribing to a service for your car has not been a business model that has done all that well. So it's difficult to find the angle you're going to take. So moving the AI from the cloud, where it does consume quite a few euros or dollars, into the car and an edge device, it's been a very important part of this particular effort.
I wonder, Edel, if you want to interject there and talk a little bit more about those latency concerns and those how Intel is.
I think running AI, the choice to where to run the AI depends somewhat on the use case and the underlying infrastructure that exists already. But we would see that edge AI is an area where, it's an emerging area, and the reasons for running AI at the edge are often to meet a particular, meet real-time requirements. There's latency requirements, so that responsiveness is better when you're running at the edge. There's also privacy concerns, so you don't want to, take the data maybe off your location or take it out of the location into a centralized area. The other reason I think for running AI at the edge is can be bandwidth considerations. So, processing the data at an edge location where it's where the data is collected can be the best thing to do.
Andrea, do you want to? I think you want to interject.
Yes, I was about to add to that, because when Edel mentioned the compliance, I think it's important to also add the security angle as well, because we use a lot of ML tooling, ML packages, but we often do not keep in mind the security concerns that can appear, especially when using unmaintained tooling or unsecured tooling. And that's one of the biggest challenges that is not a first thought, but when it comes to running it in production, and especially when it comes to reaching to the edge, it's very important, because you don't want your car to be driven by someone else except you, for example.
Yeah, that's quite right. So many manufacturers are currently taking special precautions, like not giving the AI access to critical functions of the car. So, to turn a critical function on or off, you can ask your AI, and they will happily show you in the menu where you need to go in order to turn it off, but they won't actually do it for you. So that security is a major topic. It's something that the automotive industry is still learning very much. Just recently, with the new past cybersecurity regulations, it is still a very fresh thing. In the past, automobiles were closed ecosystems that you put together, you build, you put on the road, and you largely didn't deal with them unless there was a recall. This is changing drastically. Connectivity, modern features like downloadable software, and all of these things are vastly changing the landscape of the auto industry, and security is becoming a big issue. And especially in conjunction with AI, it's an extremely important issue, because now all of a sudden security, data integrity, privacy, all of the things become topics that in the auto industry were never existent before.
And also, going back to the challenges, one other challenge that is important mentioning is identifying the right use case. There is an infinite number of options that you can have in each of the industries that we already mentioned, but how do you select the right ones, and then how do you get started is still something that I think organizations struggle. And depending on their expertise, on their background, it can be easier or not to onboard AI within their day-to-day activities as well.
Claire, I wonder if you would want to interject as well and talk a little bit more about the challenges you face. One common challenge we often hear about is getting good data sets, right? So how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, when we're looking at these operational automation, you have self-healing environments kind of use cases, getting clean data is always a struggle. In order to create a model that can operate and to our expectations, we have to collect a lot of data, but that means we have to log a lot of stuff, and we may have a lot of false positives or false alerts. And so our team had to focus an awful lot on building out a robust logging, monitoring, and alerting infrastructure as a really good baseline to enable the quality types of data sets. We don't have too many false positives or too much noisiness in the process.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Gloria, I just wanted to make one other point. When you're running models at the edge, it can be computationally intensive, right? And one of the areas that I see, some focus on is the importance of the efficiency of the models. And there is some investigations on, maybe running the models at a lower resolution, maybe running them at an integer 4 format rather than a floating point format, so that they use less resources, but they still need to meet the SLA for the use case. And I think that's an emerging area of interest.
Jens, go ahead.
Yeah, just so briefly come to that particular point, yes, and that's one of the inhibitors in autonomous driving, right? I mean, aside from all the other issues with safety and all of the other problems associated with it, putting enough computational power into a car, especially if you consider EVs, because if you're going to spend a kilowatt running your autonomous drive box, well, that's a kilowatt less you have to drive around, right? So it's something you have to absolutely consider, and that's been a challenge. There are more and more manufacturers. NVIDIA, we heard from NVIDIA today, they certainly have been quite active in this space, but we're still on the ragged edge of having the computational capacity necessary on device, on edge, and obviously you need it for autonomous driving on edge to actually realize such a function.
That definitely resonates in telco as well. Our network edge, I don't know if anyone has been in an exchange or a network point of presence. Sometimes they look like a cabinet or a closet, and they don't have a very good power. We have to be really, we focus an awful lot on being very green and efficient use of power. And that's something that we're thinking through right now. How do we enable AI at the edge? Or is there potentially a different model where we can stream, and how do we kind of manage that within the power constraints that we have in our edge locations?
So in order to solve a lot of these challenges, I think that industries and people like yourself, right, need to be working a lot more closely together. So I'm wondering, Andrea, since we recently announced, for example, that we just joined OPEA, how do you see that collaboration playing out in the market right now? And can you tell us about that?
Yes, for those who are not familiar, OPEA comes from Open Enterprise AI, and it's an organization that is part of the Linux Foundation, and it helps enterprises use open source tooling for their enterprise AI use cases. Now, such an organization really brings together different industry leaders from different areas, telcos, financial services, silicon vendors as well, and it challenges them to address some of the pressing problems that have been in the AI space for a while or are coming up as the market matures. And I think that is an important opportunity that it makes us feel less almost alienated when it comes to AI/ML. Whether we talk about the cloud or the edge, or whether we talk about telco, retailers, and automotive, there are a lot of similar challenges. And the moment we start talking about them and we start addressing them, it's easy. Furthermore, if I think of use cases such as virtual assistants, having an architecture blueprint that then can be slightly adapted, it enables them and accelerates project delivery as well.
Yeah, I think the blueprints, verified reference configs are very important, kind of for making it easy for AI developers, to get up and running and to have that easy button, like, so that they can innovate quickly.
And speaking of developers and of course innovating quickly, what does it really take to move beyond a POC? Because we hear there's a lot of stats out there in the market, like 75% of AI projects never make it to production. So how do you see that? Go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, sure. So for us, we needed to be able to move quite quickly. So we first started leaning on public cloud and disambiguated data sets to be able to, start to run and train our models, get familiar with, the findings that we could get from LLMs and things like that. But we're quite quickly moving into a space where we need to rehome it on premise to be able to use production grade data, and also because telcos in the UK are held to the Telecom Security Act, which has quite strict penalties for mishandling data or for not respecting sovereignty of data and things like that. So we're having to quite quickly pivot to exhausting what we can do in the public cloud, scoping out what we need and getting just enough installed on-prem so that we can start getting things going.
And Andrea, at least in your case, can you also talk a little bit more about that getting started experience for developers? Yeah.
I was about to say that I think what it takes initially is really lowering the barrier entry for data scientists. I think there are an infinite number of jokes on the market on data scientists tinkering more with the tooling rather than building ML models. So helping them set up their ML environment quickly is going to make them faster validate different projects, because not all the use cases and all the ideas that we have are going to actually run in production, and enabling them to quickly experiment and validate that is going to accelerate actually project delivery. But then also, if I move beyond that, it is worth mentioning automation. Automating the ML workloads, it is important, because otherwise it turns into a set of manual tasks that are built or are run in order to automate some other manual tasks, and is not very effective either.
And Jens, I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about your collaboration with Canonical, because of course a lot of what helps speed up some of this work is that enabling OS, that enabling platform. And I think, of course, you can share more about EB Corpus Linux, for instance, and the kind of work we're doing there together.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean that Linux is the undisputed leader in running AI workloads. I think nobody will argue that point here. So yeah, I mean, it's clear that Linux, and we at Elektrobit definitely see this, so, and that's why we're obviously working on this foundation, is going to be the key enabler to bringing bigger, more complicated networks, especially onto the edge devices. So our primary focus has been embedded software on the target device, and we're focusing very much on enabling the technology on the edge. And with that, of course, you need the technologies in order to make that possible on the edge. And Canonical's broad suite of software to enable these capabilities have been very helpful. Plus, of course, we're of course using Ubuntu as our development platform in-house as well, because clearly all the tools are already integrated and all it works, the stack works very well. So, why try to reinvent the wheel? So it's been a great enabler, and it certainly will be a key part of pushing more and more AI technology into the vehicle, into the car.
I think the data science stack, DSS, it's been a great partnership between Intel and Canonical, and I'm hoping that partnerships like that could provide the easy button for AI developers to really kickstart them.
I think it is exactly what it does. When we look at the data science stack, it takes 3 commands to set up your ML environment, and then the ability to easily access the compute resources, the GPUs that Intel has, for example, without worrying on setting them up, is what makes a difference for data scientists, I would say.
And for those, by the way, who haven't watched the talk we had yesterday on the data science stack, you can really watch within 3 commands how to set up your environment very easily. And also, of course, in the run through, our engineer there gives you a very nice demo. So I welcome you to check it out. So let's talk a little bit about the future, right? We all hear about generative AI, and of course it's led to a huge boom right now. And I'm just curious. Is it hype or not? Like, what are the kind of like use cases you're seeing in practice? What are the things you're hearing or maybe even trying internally?
Yeah, we see a lot of interest in Gen AI and, in a number of models there, but I think that there are initiatives that will kind of encourage, open source, open framework, standard API initiatives that can, you know, help with that Gen AI, maybe bring it from hype kind of across the chasm. You know, I think that our end customers will want an open ecosystem. You know, they don't want to be locked in. So I think that that's very important, you know, in this Gen AI hype.
But I think that's being addressed if you look at the large number of open source LLMs, for example, that are popping up. And I think in general, the AI industry has been moving a lot towards open source. But I completely agree with you, Ida, that there's a lot of hype around Gen AI. But in fact, organizations still do a lot more traditional machine learning and are just looking at Gen AI and experimenting with it, not necessarily running in production.
And what else do you see in the future in terms of AI in your industry, in your particular industry?
Sure, yeah. I mean, in telco, it's a real step change. So telcos are quite asset heavy. We're starting to see diminishing returns as the Gs increase. And it's going to be the next big thing in telco that really makes a big step change in efficiency and how we do things and how we evolve as an industry. And it's going to mean a change in investing in wires in the ground and towers to focusing a lot more on software and systems that enable us to do things smarter with the data. So I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that the operational use cases really take hold. Looking forward to seeing how we can drive it within the open source community. We're massive evangelists of open source, and I hope that this is something that is really run with.
Jens?
I think again, there's the two aspects. So you obviously will see an increase in the use of AI in the consumer-facing part, in the vehicle part. But I think also, I completely agree with you. I think there's an earth-shattering change coming here everywhere in the industry, especially now that connectivity allows you to collect more data about each vehicle or about fleets of vehicles. We believe there's going to be changes in the industry, in the insurance industry, the way that insurance contracts, pay-as-you-use contracts or risk-based contracts. We already see some of those coming, for example, in the US. So I think there's massive change, and I think a lot of that will be AI driven. As far as generative AI goes, I think to a limited degree, of course, in the natural language interaction models, and of course in the development workflow. I think that Gen AI will play a significant role in the development workflow. You alluded to this particular point, I think, earlier before. We are, the SDV, everybody's talking about SDV now, the software-defined vehicle. But what that really means is really a generational change on how the software lifecycle is managed for the car, right? In the past years, as I said before, you put the software in a car and you sent the car out a particular model and you basically forgot about existence and moved on to the next generation car. That will change. Now software will be developed as a platform. It will be developed as a continuous cycle. So we'll have a very long life cycle. It will only then be deployed to each generation of vehicle as sort of a little branch off of that. And to enable these complex software models for autonomous driving, for the new digital cockpit with all its features, that will be a lot driven by developer efficiency, because we're very inefficient as an industry right now. Software development in the automotive industry, if you just look at the amount of lines generated per day, is abysmally poor. So it's we all can, as the industry, and we as Elektrobit are investing heavily in this area. We believe that in the software-defined vehicle life cycle, in the software life cycle behind the SDV, there's a great deal of value to be used with generative AI, coding help, the coding helpers to actually speed up the development process. So I think that's going to play a lot of role in various different places all over the place, consumer facing, other industries that are behind the actual automotive manufacturing industry, like insurances and whatnot, and also in the software development lifecycle. As the SDV takes hold, that will play a major role.
Go ahead, Andrea.
I think when we look also the future of AI in general, the future is going to focus more on confidentiality. We talked today about confidential AI, confidential VMs, and I think that's not going to be an optional for very much longer. And it's going to be prioritized as projects matures. But also we will have more industries going or getting together to work in order to improve the user experience, but also to accelerate some of the common use cases, which are think are going to almost be embedded in our day-to-day lives. We don't find driving a car anymore as special as it used to be. We find it normal to have a car. I think at some point we're going to have AI applications normal in our life.
Ido?
Like in regards to the question, where are we going next, or what does the future hold? Like, I think there's new projects like Hugging Face that I think are very interesting, where you have, models being shared and that, across different industries, because I think that's going to be something that's very interesting in the future. The efficiency of the models, the latencies that they meet. I think not every use case probably needs the stringent requirements that, say, banking would impose. So there's probably some options there for models that don't meet those stringent use cases, and I think that could kind of accelerate the use of AI.
Okay, very well. I think we're nearing the end of the panel. So any closing remarks or thoughts that you want the audience to take away when it comes to AI, and how maybe they can work with you as well to take their models to production?
I can be maybe boring, but I always encourage everyone to start with the problem. Don't do AI in your organization, especially just because you heard BT is doing AI or because Elektrobit is doing AI, but start with the problem that you're really trying to solve and build on it, because otherwise the return on investment will not be as you expect, and you might end up being stuck in experimentation, as many of the surveys that we see out there are saying.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's always important to look at the business case and the TCO, and not to forget that.
Excellent. And Jens, any closing remarks for the automotive industry?
Yeah, I think there's going to be, we're still in the learning phase in the automotive industry. What I hear from you here on the panel, we have a long way to go. Even some of the words you use and some of the terms, it's like, okay, yeah, all right. We have a long way to go, but I think collaborative working, we at Elektrobit have, jumped our own shadow in some ways. The automotive industry used to be a very closed place when it comes to software, right? Software was a highly proprietary thing. Everybody made custom for their particular vehicle, and we're moving into open source, right? When we're trying to push real heavy on that, contributing everywhere, working with Canonical, and I think the same needs to happen with the AI as far as that goes. Still there's a certain trend in the industry to, do our own thing special, but I think because of the complexity and the scale of the problem, much more collaboration is going to be needed. So I wish if people are listening in the automotive industry, please let's talk, let's work collaboratively on finding solutions to these problems.
A couple things resonate. Using the right solution for the right problem, definitely. And in an industry like telco that has yet to be really significantly disrupted, even if this pushes us towards using advanced ML, like you mentioned, I view that as a positive step change, right? And if this hype ends up, we don't go all in on AI, maybe we use more data analytics and make more data-driven decisions, or we start moving more towards ML or automation or things like that. I think that's all goodness. It pushes industries forward, and particularly more traditional industries that haven't been as disrupted yet. So I view it all as really positive. Have a lot of great hopes, and I really hope that the open source community and some of those projects like TensorFlow, PyTorch, Hugging Face really start driving the industry more towards an open ecosystem, whereas OpenAI kind of made a very different decision that I think took us down a bit of a different path. So I have a lot of great faith in the open source community.
Thank you, Claire. Obviously for us as an open source company, right, it's interesting to think about it, because we think that the open source community is a really good position to solve a lot of these challenges that organizations face, from skills transfer, where in open source, of course, you have open product development and documentation, and there's a large community out there who's willing to help and answer questions and share knowledge. So that's one of the very first things, right? But also in the case of Canonical, it's bringing all of these different tools and frameworks together in a platform, right, and offering it as a solution that's also secure, right, and maintained, and with all the compliance requirements that you may face, which is actually we didn't touch upon a lot in the panel, but as we saw earlier from Rayrig Pacific, the logistics company, or one of our customers, right? This was the main challenge they had actually in delivering their AI product, right? Was meeting those compliance requirements, and it can often be, let's say, a secondary thought, but it's actually very important, especially if you want to be able to deliver solutions securely. And in automotive, for instance, safety, which follows from security, is super important. So, yeah.
Yeah, if I could add something to that. So yeah, I mean, the one thing, the automotive industry, as much as I just said negative about it, but it's also a very complicated place because it's the most complex single piece of consumer technology that you're putting out there that has by far the largest catalog of regulations to meet, right? Because I mean, it's millions of them on the road, and imagines a rogue AI of some kind taking control of cars. This is not a scenario that anybody wants, right? So it's extremely important that safety and security and all of those aspects are met, which is one of the reasons why we're moving ahead slowly, because I mean, the consumer has confidence in their car, and we certainly don't want to damage that, right? I mean, today you expect your car to do what you want it to do. Imagine it suddenly decides not to. Right? That would not be a good situation. So it's a very regulation-laden industry, and we have to deal and consider a lot of aspects, and of course, safety and security being the most prominent among them.
But adding to that, it is worth mentioning that there is a journey that organizations have when they start on AI, and often they get scared by the project complexity because you want a self-driving car that does it all on its own. Whereas you should, as a developer and also as an enterprise, to split it into smaller milestones and accept that it's not going to be always smooth and just you try it once and it works. Machine learning comes with experimentation, and experimentation means that you try multiple times and you stay creative. If you have industry leaders that also help you out, it accelerates the process, of course, but it is a journey at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. And thank all of you for joining us in this journey and these 2 days. We hope you've enjoyed the event. And I want to once again thank our distinguished panel here for joining us in person at the Canonical office. Thank you very much.